When I pulled into the driveway of my house in Willow Creek after almost a year away, the last thing I expected was a stranger standing on my porch with a clipboard, acting like she owned the place. Her name was Patricia Barnes, and she introduced herself as the president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. She didn't even flinch when I told her this was my house. Instead, she smiled in that bureaucratic, polished way and informed me I owed the HOA $8,400 in back assessments, maintenance fees, and compliance penalties. I laughed at first, thinking she had the wrong address. But then she showed me the paperwork: professional letterhead, itemized charges, bylaws, and even my supposed signature authorizing the HOA to maintain my abandoned property. My stomach dropped. The signature looked disturbingly close to mine. I hadn't been gone for fun. 11 months earlier, my younger brother collapsed from a sudden heart condition in Houston. He needed surgery, and someone had to help with the endless bills, appointments, and rehab. I packed up, took leave from my job, and stayed with him through the worst year of our lives. Coming home to find an HOA claiming my house as theirs was like stepping into a nightmare. Patricia wasn't some unhinged neighbor screaming about weeds. She was calm, articulate, and disturbingly professional. She rattled off local statutes, HOA covenants, and county codes like she had a law degree. When I refused to pay, she slid a bright orange notice under my door on her way out. Non-payment will trigger lien proceedings in 14 business days. I called the county sheriff, thinking this was obviously fraud, but the deputy shrugged after glancing at the papers. "Looks like a civil dispute," he said. "You'll have to fight it in court." I felt like I'd been gut punched. I just buried myself in debt helping my brother, and now I was staring down a legal battle with a homeowners association I'd never joined. That night, while I sat among unopened boxes, trying to process the chaos, I noticed movement outside. A white SUV idled across the street with its lights off. When I stepped onto the porch, it drove away slowly, like it wasn't in any hurry. Minutes later, I found a flyer shoved in my mailbox, an HOA pamphlet about community protection and property standards. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about money. They wanted me gone. The next morning, Patricia escalated. A photograph slid under my door showed my brother's hospital in Houston with a Willow Creek HOA business card taped to the entrance sign. My hands shook. They knew where I'd been, who I'd been with, and how vulnerable I was. I called my old college roommate, Eric, who was now an attorney. He drove down from Dallas that afternoon, and together we combed through the paperwork. His face darkened as he read. "They've fabricated a whole file on you," he said. "Meeting minutes, authorizations, even board resolutions. It looks legitimate unless you know it's fake." He explained something that chilled me further. Willow Creek's HOA had a reputation for aggressive enforcement. Their covenants were decades old, drafted back when the subdivision was just a dusty development. Record keeping was a mess. If Patricia had insider knowledge of those gaps, she could spin them into something resembling legal authority. Sure enough, when Eric pulled county records, we found that my property deed hadn't been updated properly when my parents transferred the house to me. A clerical error left a crack wide enough for Patricia to wedge herself through. I thought the nightmare couldn't get worse, but it did. That evening, I stopped at the local grocery store. Conversations died as soon as I walked in. People I'd known for years avoided eye contact. The cashier, who used to ask about my family, rang me up in total silence. My phone buzzed later with a link to a neighborhood Facebook group, Willow Creek United. At the top was Patricia's post. "Out-of-town owner abandons property for nearly a year, now threatens our community with fraudulent claims." Beneath it were hundreds of comments accusing me of being a scammer, a freeloader, a danger to property values. It was psychological warfare. Patricia had weaponized my absence caring for my brother, twisting it into abandonment. Eric and I decided to confront her directly. We walked into the HOA office during business hours. Residents filled the waiting room, clutching folders, waiting to pay dues. Patricia looked up from her desk with that same professional smile. "Mr. Carter, I trust you've reviewed your payment options?" I dropped a certified copy of my parents' original deed transfer on her desk. "This is my house. You've been operating under false pretenses." For the first time, her smile faltered. She shuffled papers, called the county clerk, then the HOA's law firm. Her voice rose as she tried to argue, but she couldn't hide the panic flickering across her face. Residents watched, some filming on their phones. Patricia dismissed the meeting abruptly, locking the office doors behind us. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Withdraw your claim in 24 hours or your family will learn the truth about Houston. My stomach twisted. What truth? My brother's illness? The hospital bills? Patricia was digging into my life. Eric told me to document everything, but law enforcement wouldn't act until there was concrete evidence. Meanwhile, Patricia doubled down. She organized a community emergency meeting at the church. I showed up with Eric and my neighbor David, a retired cop who'd always looked out for me. Walking into that hall felt like walking into enemy territory. 60 residents sat in pews, glaring at me. Patricia stood at the pulpit with a slideshow, claiming I'd left the neighborhood vulnerable to crime, weeds, and falling property values. She called me a greedy outsider trying to seize land with suspicious documents. When I stood to explain I'd been caring for my dying brother, someone shouted, "Convenient excuse!" The crowd murmured agreement. Patricia had them in the palm of her hand. She was brilliant at twisting facts, turning sacrifice into selfishness. My cheeks burned as people I'd known since childhood stared at me like I was a criminal. The following days were hell. Patricia's volunteers went door to door with glossy folders warning about fraudulent claims and dangerous outsiders. My only allies were David and Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly woman who remembered my parents buying the house decades ago. She insisted she had old survey maps in her basement that might help. Eric kept digging. One night, he stormed into my kitchen with a discovery. Your parents' deed isn't the whole story. The original land grant covers the entire east side of Willow Creek, not just your lot. The HOA has been operating on property that technically belongs to your family. The implications hit me hard. Patricia wasn't just harassing me. She was running her whole HOA empire on land she didn't control. We planned to reveal this during a local news interview. Patricia agreed, probably thinking she could humiliate me on camera. She arrived with character witnesses and binders of evidence. She was smooth, passionate, compelling. The reporter nodded along as she painted me as a villain. When it was my turn, I stayed calm. I presented certified records, old survey maps from Mrs. Alvarez, and the deed history proving my family's ownership. Patricia's composure cracked. She stammered, shouted, ripped off her mic, and stormed away. The footage went viral. Overnight, #HO meltdown trended locally, but Patricia wasn't finished. That night, David spotted her SUV idling near my house with its lights off. Later, my security camera caught her breaking in through the back door. She planted forged letters in my desk, violent threats supposedly written by me. The next morning, she filed for a restraining order, claiming I was dangerous. It was diabolical. If the order stuck, I'd be barred from my own home. Eric was furious. This is tampering, breaking and entering, but proving it will be tough. Then came the bombshell. Patricia had contacted federal authorities, claiming there were unresolved boundary disputes between Willow Creek and adjacent federal land. Within a week, every resident got a certified letter. A federal boundary hearing would determine ownership. Panic spread like wildfire. Residents who'd once trusted me now screamed that I'd triggered the investigation. Patricia seized the moment. She posted videos declaring herself the community's defender against federal overreach. Families lined up to pay her special protection fees. She was turning chaos into profit. But then Mrs. Alvarez came through. In her basement, we found a 1978 letter from my father, confirming the federal survey had been corrected decades earlier. Eric rushed to the state archives and found the official filing. If we could get it into federal records before the hearing, Patricia's entire scheme would collapse. We had less than 48 hours. Eric drove through the night to Denver, filed the documents, and returned exhausted but triumphant. The evidence was now officially recognized. The federal courthouse was packed the day of the hearing. Cameras, residents, reporters. Patricia delivered a flawless presentation about protecting Willow Creek from fraud. Witnesses praised her dedication. For a moment, even I doubted myself. Then Eric stood and presented the newly filed correction. A federal surveyor confirmed it. The land had been resolved in my family's favor decades ago. The HOA had no authority. Patricia's face drained of color. She shuffled papers, stammered objections, then snapped. She shouted about forged documents, stormed the clerk's desk, and had to be restrained by bailiffs. The cameras caught everything. Her trance from polished leader to raving conspiracist. Within hours, federal prosecutors opened a fraud investigation. The state suspended her HOA's license. Local police finally issued warrants for harassment, evidence tampering, and stalking. Residents, horrified, disbanded the HOA. In the months that followed, Willow Creek rebuilt itself. Instead of an oppressive HOA, we formed a voluntary neighborhood association based on transparency. David ran security workshops. Mrs. Alvarez became the community historian, archiving the documents Patricia had tried to bury. Property values rose, not fell. I often sit on my porch now, watching kids play in yards Patricia once threatened with fines. The fear is gone, replaced by something better: cooperation, honesty, resilience. Patricia is serving 3 years in federal prison. I'll never forget the way she glared at me as bailiffs dragged her from the courtroom, spitting words that still haunt me. This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started. Maybe she's right. Maybe this fight isn't truly over. But I know one thing. Willow Creek is stronger without her, and no HOA will ever steal my home again.